Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 14 of our reading of George Orwell's 1984. And in the last, I believe in the last video, Winston got to know Julia pretty well. And they developed a kind of communication system called communicating in installments or something. But anyways, we're going to find out more about that. We are only to page 107 of like 245, so we've got a long ways to go. We will go over the copyright information first. Plus we have probably 2 or 3 videos just of extra content, like the reading of this paragraph right here, and the one about Newspeak, and the afterword. But it says here that the afterword was copyright 1961, so this book is basically copyright 1961. And it says all rights reserved, including the right to reproduce this book or portions thereof in any form. And that's what I'm going by. We are going to pick up where we left off so we can get a few pages in here. Let's see if I can remember where we left off. Oh, yeah. A rocket bomb had exploded and they got covered in plaster dust, basically. Okay. Yeah. We were right here because yeah. Because a rocket bomb went off and they got banged up a little bit. I don't think they got banged up too bad, but let's continue. There were evenings when they reached their rendezvous. Sorry. I thought that said marvelous for a minute, so I'm going to have to read this again. There were evenings when they reached their rendezvous and they had to walk past one another without a sign because a patrol had just come around the corner or a helicopter was hovering overhead. Even if they had been less dangerous, it would still have been difficult to find time to meet. Winston's working week was 60 hours. Julia's was even longer, and their free days varied according to the pressure of work and did not often coincide. Julia, in any case, seldom had an evening completely free. She spent an astonishing amount of time in attending lectures and demonstrations, distributing literature for the Junior Anti-Sex League, preparing banners for Hate Week, making collections for the savings campaign, and such like activities. It paid, she said. It was camouflage. If you kept the small rules, you could break the big ones. She even induced Winston to mortgage yet another of his evenings by enrolling himself for the part-time munition work, which was done voluntarily by zealous party members. So, let's see. We need page 108 now, I guess. So, one evening every week, Winston spent 4 hours of paralyzing boredom screwing together small bits of metal, which were probably parts of bomb fuses, in a draughty, ill-lit workshop where the knocking of hammers mingled drearily with the music of the telescreens. Drearily, rather. When they met in the church tower, the gaps in their fragmentary conversation were filled up. It was a blazing afternoon. The air in the little square chamber above the bells was hot and stagnant, and smelled overpoweringly of pigeon dung. They sat talking for hours on the dusty, twig-littered floor, one or another of them getting up from time to time to cast a glance through the narrow slits to make sure that no one was coming. Julia was 26 years old. She lived in a hostel with 30 other girls. Always in the stink of women. How I hate women, she said parenthetically. And she worked, as he had guessed, on the novel writing machines in the fiction department. She enjoyed her work, which consisted chiefly of running and servicing a powerful but tricky electric motor. She was not clever, but was fond of using her hands and felt at home with machinery. She could describe the whole process of composing a novel, from the general directive issued by the planning committee down to the final touching up by the rewrite squad. But she was not interested in the finished product. She didn't much care for reading, she said. Books were just a commodity that had to be produced, like jam or bootlaces. She had no memories of anything before the early 60s, and the only person she had ever known who talked frequently of the days before the revolution was a grandfather who had disappeared when she was 8. At school, she had been captain of the hockey team and had won the gymnastics trophy 2 years running. She had been a troop leader in the Spies and a branch secretary in the Youth League before joining the Junior Anti-Sex League. She had always borne an excellent character. She had even an infallible mark of good reputation been picked out to work in pornosec, the subsection of the fiction department, which turned out cheap pornography for distribution among the proles. It was named Muck House by the people who worked in it. She remarked then, it was nicknamed Muck House by the people who worked in it, she remarked. There she had remained for a year, helping to produce booklets in sealed packets where titles like Spanking Stories or One Night in a Girls' School to be bought furtively by proletarian youths who were under the impression that they were buying something illegal. What are these books like? Asked Winston curiously. Oh, ghastly rubbish. They're boring, really. They only have 6 plots. But they swap them around a bit. Of course, I was only on the kaleidoscopes. I was never in the rewrite squad. I'm not literary, dear. Not even enough for that. He learned with astonishment that all the workers in pornosec, except the head of the department, were girls. The theory that men, whose sex instincts were less controllable than those of women, were in greater danger of being corrupted by the filth they handled. They don't even like having married women there, she added. Girls are always supposed to be so pure. Here's one who isn't, anyway. She had her first love affair when she was 16 with a party member of 60 who later committed suicide to avoid arrest. And a good job, too, said Julia. Otherwise, they'd have had my name out of him when he confessed. Since then, there have been various others. Life, as she saw it, was quite simple. You wanted a good time. They, meaning the party, wanted to stop you having it. You broke the rules as best you could, she seemed to think. It's just as natural that they should want to rob you of your pleasures as that you should want to avoid being caught. She hated the party and said so in the crudest words, but she made no general criticism of it except where it touched upon her own life. She had no interest in party doctrine. He noticed that she never used newspeak words, except the ones that had passed into everyday use. She had never heard of the Brotherhood and refused to believe in its existence. Any kind of organized revolt against the party would be bound to be a failure. Struck her as stupid. The clever thing was to break the rules and stay alive all the time. He wondered vaguely how many others like her there might be in the younger generation, people who had grown up in the world of revolution, knowing nothing else, accepting the party as something unalterable like the sky, not rebelling against its authority, but simply evading it as a rabbit dodges a dog. They did not discuss the possibility of getting married. It was too remote to be worth thinking about. No imaginable committee would ever sanction such a marriage, even if Catherine, Winston's wife, could somehow have been got rid of. It was hopeless even as a daydream. What was she like, your wife? Said Julia. She was, do you know the newspeak term good think? Full? Meaning naturally orthodox, incapable of thinking a bad thought. No, I don't know that. I don't know the word, but I know the kind of person, right enough. He began to tell her the story of his married life, but curiously enough, she appeared to know the essential part of it already. She described to him, almost as though she had seen it or felt it, the stiffening of Catherine's body as soon as he touched her, the way in which she still seemed to be pushing him from her with all her strength, even when her arms were clasped tightly around him. With Julia, he felt no difficulty in talking about such things. Catherine, in any case, had long ceased to be a painful memory and become merely a distasteful one. I could have stood it if it hadn't been for one thing, he said. He told her about the frigid little ceremony that Catherine had forced him to go through on the same night every week. She hated it, but nothing would make her stop doing it. She used to call it, but you'll never guess. Our duty to the party, said Julia promptly. How did you know that? I've been at school too, dear. Sex talks once a month from the over 16s and in the youth movement. They rub it into you for years. I dare say it works in a lot of cases, but of course you can never tell. People are such hypocrites. She began to enlarge upon the subject. With Julia, everything came back to her own sexuality. As soon as this was touched upon in any way, she was capable of great acuteness. Unlike Winston, she had grasped the inner meaning of the party's sexual puritanism. It was not merely that the sex instinct created a world of its own, which was outside the party's control and which therefore had to be destroyed if possible. What was more important was that sexual privation induced hysteria, which was desirable because it could be transformed into war fever and leader worship. And the way she put it was, when you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy and you don't give a darn for anything. They can't bear you to feel like that. They want you to be bursting with energy all the time. All this marching up and down and cheering and waving flags is simply sex gone sour. If you're happy inside yourself, why would you get excited about Big Brother and the 3-year plans and the 2 minutes hate and all the rest of their bloody rot? That was very true, he thought. There was a direct, intimate connection between chastity and political orthodoxy. For how could the fear and hatred and the lunatic credulity which the party needed in its members be kept at the right pitch except by bottling down some powerful instincts and using it as a driving force? The sex impulse was dangerous to the party, and the party had turned it to account. They had played a similar trick with the instinct of parenthood. The family could not actually be abolished, and indeed people were encouraged to be fond of their children in almost the old-fashioned way. The children, on the other hand, were sympathetically turned against their parents and taught to spy on them and report their deviations. The family had become, in effect, an extension of the thought police. It was a device by means of which everyone could be surrounded night and day by informers who knew him intimately. Abruptly, his mind went back to Catherine. Catherine, who unquestionably had denounced him to the thought police if she had not happened to be too stupid to detect the unorthodoxy of his opinions. But what really recalled her to him was at this moment was the stifling heat in the afternoon, which had brought the sweat out on his forehead. He began telling Julia of something that had happened, or rather had failed to happen, on another sweltering summer afternoon 11 years ago. It was 3 or 4 months after they were married. They had lost their way on a community hike somewhere in Kent. They had only lagged behind the others for a couple of minutes, and they took a wrong turning, and presently found themselves pulled up short by the edge of an old chalk quarry. It was a sheer drop, 10 or 12 meters, with boulders at the bottom. There was nobody of whom they could ask the way. As soon as she realized that they were lost, Catherine became very uneasy. To be away from the noisy mob of hikers, even for a moment, gave her a feeling of wrongdoing. She wanted to hurry back, but the way they had come. She wanted to hurry back by the way they had come and start searching in the other direction. But at this moment, Winston noticed some tufts of. This is interesting. Of loose strife growing in the cracks of the cliff beneath them. One tuft was of 2 colors, magenta and brick red, apparently growing on the same root. He had never seen anything of the kind before, and he called to Catherine to come and look at it. "Look, Catherine, look at those flowers. That clump down near the bottom. Do you see? They're 2 different colors." She had already turned to go, but she did rather fretfully come back for a moment. She even leaned out over the cliff face to see where he was pointing. He was standing a little behind her, and he put his hand on her waist to steady her. At that moment, it suddenly occurred to him how completely alone they were. There was not a human creature anywhere. Not a leaf stirring, not even a bird awake. In a place like this, the danger that there would be a hidden microphone was very small, and even if there was a microphone, it would only pick up sounds. It was the hottest, sleepiest hour of the afternoon. The sun blazed down upon them, and sweat tickled his face, and the thought struck him. "Why don't you give her a good shove?" said Julia. "I would have." "Yes, dear, you would have. I would have, if I'd been the same person then as I am now, or perhaps I would. I'm not certain." "Are you sorry you didn't?" "Yes. On the whole, I'm sorry I didn't." They were sitting side by side on the dusty floor. He pulled her closer against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The pleasant smell of her hair conquered the pigeon dung. He was very young. She was very young, he thought, but still expected something from life. She did not understand that to push an inconvenient person over a cliff solves nothing. Actually, it would have made no difference, he said. "Then why are you sorry you didn't do it?" "Only because I prefer a positive to a negative. In this game that we're playing, we can't win. Some kinds of failure are better than other kinds, that's all." He felt her shoulders give a wriggle of dissent. She always contradicted him when he said anything of this kind. She would not accept it as a law of nature that the individual is always defeated. In a way, she realized that she herself was doomed, and sooner or later the thought police would catch her and kill her. But with another part of her mind, she believed that it was somehow possible to construct a secret world in which you could live as you chose. All you needed was luck and cunning and boldness. She did not understand that there was no such thing as happiness, that the only victory lay in the far future, long after you were dead. That from the moment of declaring war on the party, it was better to think of yourself as a corpse. We are the dead, he said. We're not dead yet, said Julia. Prosaically? Not physically. 6 months, a year, 5 years, conceivably. I am afraid of death. You are young, so presumably you're more afraid of it than I am. Obviously, we shall put it off as long as we can, but it makes very little difference. So long as human beings say human, death and life are the same thing. Oh, rubbish. Which would you sooner sleep with, me or a skeleton? Don't you enjoy being alive? Don't you like feeling, this is me, this is my hand, this is my leg, I'm real, I'm solid, I'm alive? Don't you like this? She twisted herself around and pressed her bosom against him. He could feel her breast ripe and firm through her overalls. Her body seemed to be pouring some of its youth and vigor into his. Yes, I like that, he said. Then stop talking about dying, and now listen, dear. We've got to fix up about the next time we meet. We may as well go back to the place in the woods. We've given it a good long rest, but you must get there by a different way this time. I've got it all planned out. You take the train, but look, I'll draw it out for you. And in her practical way, she scraped together a small square of dust, and with a twig from a pigeon's nest began drawing a map on the floor. We are to part 4. I'm not going to say chapter because there's only 3 chapters in the book. This is part 4. Winston looked around the shabby little room above Mr. Charrington's shop. Beside the window, the enormous bed was made up with ragged blankets and a coverless bolster. The old-fashioned clock with the 12-hour face was ticking away on the mantelpiece. In the corner, on the gate-leg table, the glass paperweight, which he had bought on his last visit, gleamed softly out of the half darkness. In the fender was a battered tin oil stove, a saucepan, and 2 cups provided by Mr. Charrington. Winston lit the burner and set a pan of water to boil. He had brought an envelope full of Victory coffee and some saccharin tablets. The clock's hand said 7:20. It was 19:20 really. She was coming at 19:30. Folly, folly, his heart kept saying. Conscious, gratuitous, suicidal folly. Of all the crimes that a party member could commit, this one was the least possible to conceal. Actually, the idea had first floated into his head in the form of a vision of the glass paperweight mirrored by the surface of the gate-leg table. As he had foreseen, Mr. Charrington had made no difficulty about letting the room. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term, sorry. About letting the room. Now I lost my place, sorry about that. He was obviously glad for a few dollars that it would bring him, nor did he seem shocked or become offensively knowing when it was made clear that Winston wanted the room for the purpose of a love affair. Instead, he looked into the middle distance and spoke in generalities, with so delicate an air as to give the impression that he had become partly invisible. Privacy, he said, was a very valuable thing. Everyone wanted a place where they could be alone, occasionally, and when they had such a place, it was only common courtesy in anyone else who knew of it to keep his knowledge to himself. He even seemed almost to fade out of existence. As he did so, added that there were 2 entries to the house, one of them through the backyard, which gave on an alley. Under the window, someone was singing. Winston peeped out, secure in the protection of the muslin curtain. The June sun was still high in the sky, and the sun-filled court below, a monstrous woman, solid as a Norman pillar, was with brawny red forearms and a sacking apron strapped about her middle. She was stumping to and fro between a wash tub and a clothesline, pegging out a series of square white things, which Winston recognized as babies' diapers. Whenever her mouth was not corked with clothespins, she sang a powerful contralto. It was only an hopeless fancy. It passed like an April's dye. But oh look, and a word, and the dreams they stirred, for I've stolen my art away. The tune had been haunting London for weeks past. It was one of countless similar songs published for the benefit of the proles by the subsection of the music department. The words of these songs were composed without any human intervention whatsoever on an instrument known as a versificator. But the woman sang so tunefully as to turn the dreadful rubbish into an almost pleasant sound. He could hear the woman singing, and the scrape of her shoes on the flagstones, and the cries of the children in the streets, and somewhere in the far distance a faint roar of traffic, and yet the room seemed curiously silent, thanks to the absence of a telescreen. Folly, 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 he thought again. It was inconceivable that they could frequent this place for more than a few weeks without being caught, but the temptation of having a hiding place that was truly their own, indoors and near at hand, had been too much for both of them. For some time after their visit to the church belfry, it had been impossible to arrange meetings. Working hours had been drastically increased in anticipation of Hate Week. It was more than a month distant, but the enormous complex preparations that it entailed were throwing extra work onto everybody. Finally, both of them managed to secure a free afternoon on the same day. They had agreed to go back to the clearing in the woods. On the evening beforehand, they had met briefly in the street as usual. Winston hardly noticed as usual, Winston hardly looked at Julia as they drifted towards one another in the crowd, but from a short glance he gave her, it seemed to him, that she was paler than usual. Paler. "It's all off," she murmured, as soon as she judged it safe to speak. "Tomorrow, I mean." "What? Tomorrow afternoon. I can't come." "Why not?" "Oh, the usual reasons. It started early this time." We are going to have to stop this right here. Well, we made it to page 115. That's pretty good. We're almost done with page 115. So, we have been reading George Orwell's 1984, and in the next one we'll probably find out why their rendezvous was cut off, or cut short, or canceled. Anyways, if you like this content, well, we've actually been reading George Orwell's 1984, but if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload, and if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.